I don't think it's nice you laughing. See, my mule don't like people laughing. It's the crazy idea you're laughing at him. Now, if you apologize like I know you're going to, I might convince him that you really didn't mean it.
This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. Once the trees were tapped and the sap wept into buckets, it takes 40 gallons of sap to boil down to 1 gallon of syrup. Ew. The product was unsurpassed sweetening to use in cooking, sell, or give to friends.
I ain't giving that to nobody. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much work that is? Oh, man, I have a hard enough time giving away, like, a jar of jam I've made. Let alone, like, This took me 6 months to make this pound of sugar. You want a lick?
Welcome back to the show. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined tonight by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
Well, thank you.
Good. Okay, we're getting right back into the story of Daniel Boone. We are at the point where he was abducted, surrendered to. He was captive by the Indians, adopted as Chattawi. Mm-hmm. The small turtle,
little turtle, yeah,
or stout turtle or something. Sturdy turtle. I don't remember now.
Something like
Chattawi was his Indian name. He was adopted by Chief Blackfish of the Shawnee. Chief Blackfish really likes him quite a bit, was very lenient. Boone was at the Blue Licks getting salt with 30 other men, I think, from Boonesborough. And in the midst of that, Boone got captured, and they were going to kill all the men at the Blue Lick and then go and kill everyone at Boonesborough, or at least like subjugate them to the Shawnee tribe. And Boone talks them into surrendering his men at the Blue Licks peacefully, and then he talks them into not going for the fort because a bunch of girls and
it was a really good scheme. It really was.
And
he pulled it off.
And you're sitting there left wondering what's his real plan exactly. I think the immediate plan was to save people's lives, number one, including his own.
I don't think there was an immediate plan. I think this was panicking in the moment. He was just like, don't kill everybody.
We'll figure things out later. You know what I mean? Like, let's take one step at a time and see what opportunities present themselves. He's a creative man.
Yeah.
So he...
no one got scalped.
Yeah, it's true. And so we've already read through that. If you want to jump back into the earlier podcast episodes to catch up, you should do it. It's a great story. But assuming that you've kept up with the story so far, Boone is now at Boonesborough because he escaped Blackfish and his people. And I said the last episode, I said I did my math was wrong. It was a long day. I think I said it was 140 miles, and in 3 days, that means he went 40 miles a day. But that would be 120 miles. 40 times 3
4, 8, 12
is 120 miles, and he went 140. Anyway, my math was wrong, and I realized it later. I was going to bed that night, and I'm like, that's not right. It's so funny, right? Like,
that's how my brain works too.
And it's like my brain's like, you dummy. So the math wasn't quite right. But the point is, he did some incredible hiking straight in 3 days. He went over 100 miles and straight to the fort. The other fella who escaped almost died in the wilderness, starving to death.
Showed up naked,
laid down and saw his initials in a tree and was like, oh, I'm at the fort, and wondered, that'd be me. Boone is some kind of mental, like, he's just incredibly gifted woodsman. He gets himself back to the fort, but the people at the fort are now, because someone escaped at the Blue Licks, they kind of went back and said, Boone betrayed us all. So people there thought Boone was in with the Shawnee.
And Boone is showing up with a shaved head, with a ponytail, top knot and stuff, decked out.
He's totally India-fied. Yeah, he's been the adopted son. They say he probably had a wife. He was living it up. And a lot of people who were with Boone in captivity as they were adopted by the Shawnee were not happy with how happy Boone was being captured.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, or maybe it's just a long story long, he gets back to the fort, and over the course of that, he's like, they're coming. The Shawnee are coming, and we got to get ready because they're coming. And so he gets the fort. They build the walls. They get the palisades done. They get the well dug. They get everything fortified for a siege and for the Indians coming. So they build up the fort. They get it done. And the Indians don't come, which then makes things awkward for Boone. And finally, though, they come. 400 or something.
Yeah.
Indians come, and the Tories, which are the British, the Empire.
They're grossly outnumbered.
We are in the midst of the Revolutionary War at this point, and they're on the frontier in Kentucky. In the last episode, Blackfish sits down with Boone. He's like, Boone, my son, Chattawi, I want to talk to you. And so remember, they go outside and they have a little powwow.
In front of the fort.
Yeah, and he's like, Boone, in tears, how could you have left me? Blackfish is crying, and he's like, oh, Boone, if I had known, and Boone is like,
you could have left whenever you wanted.
Yeah, and Boone's like, I just wanted to see my family. I missed my wife and my kids and my squaw, and I just needed to see them. And he's like, oh, well, you should have just said so. I was totally cool with you just leaving and visit, all this kind of. So they have this whole pretense going on. In the meantime, there's an ultimatum given by Blackfish. And the people in the fort are like, why is Boone so willing to just go out and parlay and talk to the Indians? Isn't he worried about getting killed and scalped and us overrun? And obviously Boone was laying it on the line to go out there and have that conversation. But I think he assessed it, and he knew that there was some genuine affection between the Shawnee and himself, between Chattawi and Blackfish. I think, honestly, if you could put yourself there, humanize this whole situation, right? You're living with the Shawnee for
months,
6 months, 4 months, something like that. 4 months.
It was like all through winter or something.
And you become, because I think it was February through June or something like that.
Yeah.
May, I don't remember. But anyway, it's a while, and you're there with them day in, day out, morning till dark. It's not like you see them twice a week. It's like all day long, every day, for months. You hang out, you shoot together, you chase turkeys together, you suffer together. They treat you like a member. You tell jokes, you hang out, you laugh. You might even have a somewhat of a relationship with a pretty woman, and like there's a whole new family situation, dynamic relationships occurring with Boone while he's there, and the whole time he has mixed allegiances, right? Because his allegiance, as you find out throughout the story, is always to the people on the frontier and to his family. Number one. But he has genuine, I think, compassion for the British, compassion for the Indians, compassion for all human beings, really. And he avoids war at all costs. If he avoids killing
as much as possible. There are plenty of times. 5 dudes took his daughter and 3 walked away. I mean, that wouldn't have worked with me.
Yeah. He's very understanding, it seems, and magnanimous. And so here he is, having been with the Indians this whole time. He has got to have an affection that's not fake. There's got to be a degree of genuine appreciation for their culture, for who they are. And they have that for him too. Like, there's a genuine appreciation there. It's got to hurt, though, because you're living in a world where you're not allowed to have both associations. You're not allowed to be buddy-buddy with the British and also the Indians and also the colonialists, also the frontier people. And so he's trying to balance it all. And in some ways, he's a peacemaker, but he also has points where, if it comes down to it, he has his goals and what he's going to do for his kin and all of that. So here we are. It's a fascinating story. He just had this conversation. We'll dive into the book right here. It says, Josiah Collins later told Reverend John Dabney Shane that Blackfish gave Boone an ultimatum, which was, "Well, Boone, I have come to take your fort. If you will surrender, I will take you to Chillicothe, and you shall be treated well. If not, I will put all the prisoners to death and reserve the young squaws for wives."
Is he talking about the prisoners that he already has, the 20 men that he took before? Or is he talking about the people in the fort? Or the men in the fort?
It doesn't say. I think he's talking about the men in the fort. And the reason I think that is because
they've
already adopted the other ones. They went through the rituals. They already did the whole You're Our Family kind of thing, which we covered in an earlier book. It's a pretty intense process. I don't think he's talking about the people that were already prisoners in the past. I think he's talking about the people in the fort. We're going to basically kill all the men and keep all the women, basically. It says that Boone or Blackfish gave Boone a letter from Hamilton. Remember, Hamilton is the governor of the British Empire, and he is the one that said, you remember Hair Buyer Hamilton? He's the one that's like, "Hey, Indians, scalp everybody, $50, bring in person in, $100." So,
stand-up guy.
Hamilton wrote a letter that said that basically, Boone, you get a pardon. I'm going to let it all slide. All you got to do is just surrender, come to Detroit. The British would replace lost property, and give officers equivalent ranks in the British forces. Just switch sides, and we'll take care of all of you. However, if the Americans did not surrender, they would have to face the Shawnees, and there was no more that Hamilton could do for them. So either come to the British side or the Shawnee. I'll sick the Shawnee on you, and you're dead. Blackfish then showed Boone a wampum belt, which was the Shawnee letter to Boonesborough. 3 trails of beads connected the two ends: red for war, black for death, white for peace.
How do you spell wampum?
W-A-M, wham, and P-U-M. Wampum.
Wampum.
It says Boone had to choose which path would be taken. Boone replied that there was much he had to think about and talk about with the other officers at Boonesborough. Since he had been gone so long, others had taken his place of command, and he could only consult with them about a reply. So he's like, "Look, I'm not in a position to make this decision, but
I got to consult with my people."
Blackfish agreed to wait for an answer, but mentioned that his people were hungry. And so, remember, he says, "Go ahead, have a bunch of food." They gave him buffalo tongues, and to Boone as a delicacy.
For their squaws. Yeah, I've never seen that before.
It's a wampum belt. And so they basically, it's symbolic.
Yeah, there's
right?
a bunch of different kinds, but yeah.
And then that wampum belt had 3 paths, and he could choose one of the 3 paths. Yep. Okay, so as the men inside, so he goes back in. Remember how they thought the tongue might be poisonous?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "It's not. I trust me." And he ate the tongue, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, I guess it's not." So as the men inside the fort discussed Hamilton's letter and Blackfish's demands, Richard Calloway, or Dick, saw both as further evidence of Boone's treachery.
Mm-hmm.
Boone explained again that his actions at Detroit and the Blue Licks had been a scheme. Now, Detroit is where the governor was, Hamilton, and where they sold some of the...
Oh, that's right, Detroit.
Mm-hmm. And it had been a scheme to survive and return to fortify and defend Boonesborough. He's like, there was all a plan to do what I've done. This wasn't me switching sides. It was all a scheme. I was playing a double agent here. But as with all double agent situations, that's hard to know which side you're really on. Boone said that even with the overwhelming army outside, they might be able to negotiate a peace. Boone was blamed for this proposal, but he only meant to shake off responsibility, and in going to make a treaty, he did it with the intention of detaining till the soldiers came. That was who said that? Samuel South, who was a boy present at the discussion, later said. Okay, so a boy said, this is what happened. Half the men wanted to surrender, and half wanted to fight.
Gosh, that makes me so mad.
Boone asked for a show of hands or a step forward for those who wanted to surrender. Quote, "I will kill the first man who proposes surrender," Richard Calloway snapped. William Smith, who was second in command, advised that they reject the proposal and fight. Squire Boone added his voice to the discussion. This is Boone's brother, saying he would fight to the death. The vote, when it was taken, was unanimous. They would fight. Well, I'll die with the rest, Boone said. Throughout his life, Boone tried to avoid war by any means possible, but here he had no choice. The Shawnees were outside the fort, and the vote had been taken. Still, it made sense to bargain for time before the killing started. Each additional day gave them time to strengthen the defenses and increased the chances that the Virginia militia might arrive with reinforcements. Remember, they sent someone to Virginia, a letter to say, hey, we need your help. We're getting surrounded, So Boone and William Smith were chosen to parley again. Boone called to Pompey from the wall. Remember, Pompey is the black man. That's the translator.
Mm-hmm. The one that was captured forever ago. Been there for years.
He is with the Shawnee. And a meeting was arranged for that afternoon. As far as we know, Boone wore his hunting clothes to the meeting, but Smith came out dressed in a fine uniform, red tunic and plumed hat. Oh, brother. Clothes then, as now, spoke their own language. Dress served as a potent symbol of identity in an exotic world of strangers. Visibly stressing the military credentials of their own side, Boone and Smith reported that there were still more commanders within the fort. They all sat down on a panther skin in front of the fort, and Blackfish asked for a reply to Hamilton's letter. Smith answered with great formality that the offer was indeed generous, but traveling all the way to Detroit would be a great hardship for women and children and old folks. They're just stalling.
They're just stalling, man. These guys, I love it, dude. They're so dirty. They're so dirty. These are my people. Like, the more I hear these guys, I'm like, I get it. This is where I come from.
This is like frontier ingenuity. This is survival. This is like where the British seem to be, they seem to be too straightforward in many ways to survive.
And I gotta wonder,
they all want to come out in the field and face each other and just not hide behind cover and just volley bullets at each other one line at a time. Well, the Indians are like, let's hide behind bushes and do guerrilla warfare.
And I gotta wonder how much of the Indians rubbed off on the Americans.
Tons. I mean, they were intertwined.
Ton. But I mean, like, how it's affecting us today. Because we are vastly different than the British people, even though we come from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like that boy that left his gun out, and then the Indians
think
came.
About it this way, too. I mean, there's been a lot of immigration over the years into America. But the people who came here and survived, there was some salt in the. I mean,
a little bit of grit.
There was. They were tough people, so they come from a certain stock, of individual. I mean, we don't have to go back very far in our own genealogy and see where our shady ancestors came from.
What's up, Grandpa?
I mean, seriously, you can go back to each side being Irish, Wales, English, and early settlers. I mean, we have family that came here at the very outset of the religious revivals in the 1600s, 1700s, same time as this with Boone. And we have we're LDS. We're born in the LDS Church, and we have a history of pioneers that traveled west, that tried to settle, that moved into Salt Lake City
with hand carts,
and later went to Mexico and colonized different parts there. We have some pioneer, gritty ancestors, and then we also have the shady group we have the very proper sort of ancestors, and then we have the outlaw ancestors, and I just think they all kind of intermingle, but they all kind of had that same toughness, like they made it, they figured it out. They wanted freedom. I think that's one of the things that is a hallmark of the ancestry that is at the bedrock of America is give me liberty or give me death.
Yeah.
That attitude of liberty above all. Like, I'd rather you don't put a lion in a cage. You know, I'd rather die a lion free than live for 40 years as a lion in a cage. I'd rather die in 5 years than 40 in a cage. Like, I'd rather be free and die than caged and die. And that's one of the things about modern culture that bothers me is how many individuals are like, I just want to be safe. Take all my freedoms, everything away, just keep me safe. That's not life. I don't think that is what that's not American.
Nope.
Give me liberty or give me death is American. Freedom, and more freedom. The individual, not the collective.
Freedom on top of my freedom.
So here we go again. It says that, Boone's statement, though, well, I'll die with the rest, indicates that he's not keen on the war, the fighting. If he'd rather strike some kind of peace, he'd rather everyone figure out a way to get along, But when it comes down to a decision made by his brother and others and their hardcore dedication, he's like, okay, well, if we're going to go down swinging, then I'm going to go down swinging. Then I'm going to, when I have to, then I will. And I think that's wise because there are a lot of hot-headed men that didn't make it very far. Like what Boone has done is he's lived a lot longer than a lot of other men have. And a lot of that has to be this extreme avoidance of fighting at all costs. Like always find a way out other than with your fists. Your fists and your guns are the worst way to try to resolve a conflict. That's always the one with the most unknowns, right? The highest degree of risk. All stakes are high. And so settling for something different that's more neutral, definitely wise, right? But here we go again. They're stalling for time. It says, he's like, oh man, we really appreciate Hamilton's letter, governor of Detroit.
Golly gee.
But, and it's generous for us to be pardoned and to get all that property. But we're worried about our women and children being able to make it. It's a long journey. I have brought 40 horses and mares for the old people and women and children to ride, Blackfish answered. Boone thanked his Shawnee father, but said there were many leaders in the fort who had to be consulted.
Many.
So Blackfish agreed to another day of talks, but Boone later said he saw in the chief's eyes a hardening as he began to suspect that Chautawi was stalling. According to John Gass, he saw that the Indians were getting angry. Boone had promised months before to surrender the fort. So many delays did not bode well. However, Blackfish agreed to a list of ground rules for the duration of the negotiations. No Indians would come within 30 yards of the fort, and the settlers would not carry arms outside the fort.
30 yards is not very far.
The Indians would help.
I can throw a rock 30 yards, bro. That's way too close.
Yeah, you're right. The Indians could help themselves to the cattle and crops they needed, while women would be free to go to the spring for water. But it was clear to Boone that this was the last delay that they could arrange.
You think I'm going to go get water?
Blackfish's patience and willingness to negotiate and delay have seemed odd to many over the years. We don't know how much he trusted Boone to keep his word and surrender the fort as promised. What is clear is that he preferred to negotiate, hoping for a surrender, rather than attack the fort outright. His reward would be greater if he delivered living prisoners to Hamilton in Detroit, rather than killing them in Kentucky and selling only the scalps. And though his army was much greater than the force inside the stockade, an assault on such a fort was by no means a sure thing. In fact, experience proved that without artillery, it was almost impossible for an army of rifles and tomahawks and bows and arrows to take a palisaded enclosure with blockhouses at each corner.
The thing's built out of wood. It's called fire.
I think they treat it a little bit, but also you got to get the fire going before you get killed, Brent. They got little holes, right?
That's right. They got little murder holes.
They got murder holes.
That's
they got
right.
Stuff from above. They're hidden, and you've got to cover 100 yards without cover.
And the women will shoot too.
Kaboom! Like I mean, yeah. the facts are the facts. They haven't been able to take these very easily in the past. It says, though the roofs were not completed, the second stories of the blockhouses jutted out over the walls so riflemen could shoot at anyone attempting to climb or burn the palisades or ram the gates. So the roofs went out like a cliff ledge over the top. So if you tried to climb, you hit a ceiling.
Smart.
And then they could just shoot you from there. It says, Blackfish did not know how many men were inside the fort.
Oh, that makes much more sense. He doesn't know what's going on. Okay.
Given such odds, his patience and willingness to negotiate show what a wise and experienced leader he was. Since they knew their time was running out, those within the fort stepped up their defensive efforts. Riflemen stood along the walls and walkways showing weapons, and women dressed as men walked back and forth in front of the gate to make the attackers think there was a greater force inside the stockade than the 60 men.
What I would have done is I would have had like 2 brooms and hats on either side. Make it look like there's 3 of us.
Those inside put dressed up dummies at strategic places to look like additional defenders.
Bro, this is the Swiss Family Robinson all over. I love this.
Luckily, Hamilton had been misinformed about the number of militia who had arrived in Kentucky that summer and had passed along his exaggerated figure to the Shawnees. There was a well in the fort, but it gave little water. Men had begun digging another well in the enclosure, and women took everything that they could hold water in to the spring and filled it. So they were just getting water in the spring as much as possible. Indians watching called out to them, "Fine squaws, fine squaws."
Little cat calling.
Oh, brother!
This is
it's
the
been
weirdest
hundreds
war.
of years, and it's still
the same.
like it happens. About noon on Tuesday, Pompey approached the gate and shouted that Blackfish and the Shawnees wanted to look at the women in the Boone's family. They had heard that Jemima was a great beauty. Boone replied that since her kidnapping, Jemima and the other women were very much afraid of Indians. Pompey answered that they would only need to come to the gate where the warriors could see them. Hoping it would buy more time, Boone persuaded Jemima and several of the other women to step outside the fort. From the distance where Blackfish and the other chiefs stood, Pompey yelled for them to let down their hair. They took out the combs, Jemima's granddaughter later said, and let their hair flow over their shoulders. The Indians appeared to enjoy the sight and then moved away. How friendly.
How bizarre. Weird.
Hey, can we see your hot babes?
Put down your hair.
Those inside the fort.
That's creepy, bro. That's creepy. I didn't like that story. Well, that's why.
Those inside the fort seem to have understood the request to see the women as a gesture on the part of Blackfish to show his appreciation and common humanity. The only resentment came from some of the men who were angry that Pompey was present. The huge black man had already irritated them with his strutting manner. As the translator, he knew he was essential, indispensable. It appeared he tried to infuriate them with his assurance and independence. They threatened to shoot him when he came within range again. Late in the day, Pompey called out to the fort that it was time for an answer. Blackfish and Malunta and the Shawnees had waited long enough. Boone and Smith and several others filed out to meet the Indians. Boone told his Shawnee father that the people inside the fort had decided to fight as long as one of them was still alive. Blackfish appeared to be shocked, speechless, and then he told Boone that his answer put the Shawnees in an awkward position. Hamilton had told him to avoid a massacre. All wanted a peaceful resolution to this standoff. Blackfish suggested that they talk further, bringing chiefs from all the Shawnee towns to the meeting. Boone was surprised by the proposal and later told Filson the added day of negotiations sounded grateful in our ears. All along, Boone had been hoping for some negotiated settlement, as had Blackfish. The two men understood each other and had a great deal in common. Boone agreed that several leaders from the fort would meet with the Council of Shawnee Chiefs the next day. The battle had been forestalled one more time.
Dang, man, what a tease. I need this siege, bro. Need a good siege in my life.
All right. So it says on Wednesday, September 9th. So this is the fall. It's getting there. End of summer, August, September, starting to turn. The women of Boonesborough prepared a large meal of venison and buffalo tongue, fresh corn and beans and squash and other vegetables, bread and milk. Tables were carried out to the meadow in front of the fort, and the Shawnees were invited to the feast. The settlers hoped that with a lavish show of frontier hospitality, they could demonstrate the confidence and affluence of the fort. If need be, they were prepared for a long siege. So they're trying to show off, hey, we got this. If you want to really come at us, look, we're stocked. We have so much food, we can, like, do this.
We're having a party.
After the feast was eaten, the Shawnee chiefs and the chosen leaders from the fort met at a spot chosen by Blackfish 60 yards from the fort near the Great Elm, the Divine Elm, where the first Kentucky convention had met 3 years before. Remember, Richard Henderson and the townies and everybody had gotten around the Divine Elm.
Its shade stretched out for, 100 yards or something crazy like that?
Can you predict, Brent, what's happening here?
No, I have no idea. So they're heading over to the tree to talk?
The site was near the rim of the bank of the small stream that ran through Sycamore Hollow. During the previous night, Blackfish had hidden several of his best riflemen in the brush nearby.
No.
9 of the leading men of Boonesborough were included in the delegation. Boone had instructed the riflemen in the fort to cover them from the loopholes. At the first sign of trouble, they were to fire into the group without fearing of hitting the settlers, as they would be more likely 2 to 1 to hit an Indian than a white man.
That's they don't play great odds out there, man. Those are terrible.
It's 50-50, right? I mean, it's actually 100 to, I mean, they're saying 2 to 1. It's not
great. It's not. You're not going to convince me that those are great odds.
That's hilarious.
Desperate times, man.
And don't hold back. Like, if things go south, just shoot.
Just shoot me.
Try not to hit me, but hey, if you do, whatever. Daniel Bryan described to Draper the seating arrangement. They all met at the appointed place and seated in the following manner. 1 white man and 2 Indians, 1 white man and 2 Indians. On the back seat, 1 Indian behind every white man.
So they're just...
They're surrounded. There's like a white man, 2 Indians, a white man, and plus an Indian behind each white man.
These Indians really like to encapsulate people. They're talking about how they were sleeping.
That doesn't sound suspicious at all, does it?
Yeah, a little.
Here, have a seat. And every white man is isolated, basically surrounded by 3 Indians. 3 Indians, 1 on each side and 1 behind. That's 3 Indians per white guy.
I mean, it sounded like better odds now. I mean, like, you have like a full surrounding of bodies. I mean, take a shot. Those odds are a little better.
Bryan said that each Indian who stood behind a white man carried a concealed tomahawk to prevent the whites from escaping.
So these people just walked out, are now prisoners.
1 chief present was named Blackhoof, another Black Bird. The Indians' faces were painted red and black for war. After a round of formal introductions, Boone pointed out that many of the Shawnees were not chiefs but young warriors. In the discussion.
Oh, really?
Blackfish sent some away, but Indians still outnumbered whites 2 to 1. So
these numbers, man, they're not winning.
Blackfish said that there were Indians in the army from 24 different towns and that there must be 1 Indian from every town.
There must be.
Both an American and a British militiaman kept minutes of the meeting, but the documents were later lost. Blackfish began by proposing to withdraw his army if the settlers would agree to abandon Kentucky in 6 weeks. This proposal was quickly rejected, and Blackfish angrily demanded, "By what right did you come here and settle here?" So he's saying, look, we'll just let you leave as long as you promise to leave. As long as you leave, we don't have to, you can be free, but just go back. And he's pissed off when they're like, no, we're not going to do that. He's like, dude, this is our land. What right do you have to be here? Boone replied that the region had been purchased from the Cherokees by Richard Henderson.
Oh, my gosh.
That's got to piss him off.
Oh.
Remember, that is what happened with Henderson, but that's like in my house, the neighbor sold it. You know what I mean? It's like the Shawnees had more claim to the land than the Cherokee did at this time. But the Cherokee were the one they bought it from. But, nobody technically owned it because Indians didn't own. They had territories that they sort of kicked people out of, intimidated people from being in. But
it was a pretense for legal reasons.
Yeah. And so he buys it. Anyway, he's like, Boone is sticking to it, Brent. But we bought it. And it says, Blackfish pretended that he knew nothing about the Sycamore Shoals Treaty and turned to Cherokee president and asked if Boone's statement was true. The Cherokee answered that what Boone said was correct. So Blackfish was like, what are you talking about? Nobody bought it, but the Cherokee said yes. Acting surprised, Blackfish said, that entirely alters the case. You must keep it and live on it in peace. Captain Smith later remembered that Blackfish proposed that both sides agree that the Ohio River was the proper boundary between them, but after a cooling off period, either side would be free to cross the river to hunt in the other's territory. Boone later told Reverend John Mason Peck that Blackfish's proposal was contingent on both sides swearing allegiance to the British Crown.
Oopsies.
Only submitting to the British authorities in Canada and taking the oath of allegiance to the king, Blackfish had to return to Detroit with something for Hamilton. So he's like, you guys can be free. We can do this stuff. Oh, and then, so it's just kind of, they're just trying to negotiate stuff.
And I got to say, Blackfish is really trying here, it feels like.
I think so too. Because first he says, you guys can just leave. And he's like, but we bought it. Oh, you bought it. Well, then you got to stay. But if you stay, you have to stay on this side of the river, and you got to submit to the king, the British Empire. That's very generous on the Shawnees' part, saying, look, we just don't want this fight. We just don't.
They don't.
But they have to give something to Hamilton because they're in allegiance there. If they can get them to switch sides but not necessarily go back to Detroit. And look, do I think for a minute that Blackfish isn't doing the same thing that Boone did for the past 4 or 5 months? He's just like, let's pretend that we're not going to have a fight so that later we can sneak into the fort and really take it over properly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're all trying to do this dance thing in some way. So anyway, it says that Boone and the other men from the fort appeared to agree to the proposal. At the very least, it gave them 6 weeks to strengthen the defenses and hope for the arrival of the militia from Virginia. They're all lying to each other. It is interesting that in this instance, Richard Calloway and the others seemed willing to play the same stratagem Boone had played at Chillicothe and Detroit to pretend to be willing to submit to the crown. So the one thing Calloway is busting Boone's chops for, he's doing right now. Yeah, we'll go along and we'll submit to the crown and sure. And then we'll leave in 6 weeks, or in 3 weeks we'll do the thing. They're just trying to buy 6 more weeks. It was 6 weeks, actually. It must have been necessary at the moment to prevent bloodshed. Who knew what would happen in the future if Blackfish withdrew his warriors across the Ohio? It's like, just buy some time. Everybody's just trying to buy time. The Indians might never be able to assemble such a force again, since there's such disparate movements and allegiances. And quote, that Boone and his friends should have signed a treaty in which the main condition was subject to the King of Great Britain appears at first view a little more questionable, John Mason Peck commented. It is almost certain neither side had any intention of observing the terms of the treaty.
I'm surprised.
Blackfish then said he must explain to his warriors the intricate details of the agreement. He stood up and turned toward the Indians assembled at a distance. In a voice of great eloquence, sounding, some said, like a preacher, others like a skilled orator, Blackfish addressed his army. Boone was only able to follow a few sentences of the speech, but they sounded consistent with what the chief had proposed. When he finished his address, Blackfish turned to the whites and said, "Brothers, we have made a long and lasting treaty, and now we will shake hands." Even though there were 2 Indians for each white, he told Boone and the others not to be alarmed. When they were very loving, they took as near the heart as they could.
Huh?
It says, even though there were 2 Indians for each white, he told Boone and the others not to be alarmed. Quote, when they were very loving, they took as near the heart as they could. He stepped up to Boone, his son, and embraced him. The other chiefs extended their arms to embrace the other Americans. The Shawnees said they would shake hands Indian style, with an Indian taking either arm of each white man. So both arms, you got 2 Indians to What's wrong, Red?
Bro, this sounds like a bunch of BS. This can't be right.
Yeah, it says this stratagem to captivate the whites had been foreseen by Boone, and according to his directions, as soon as the Indians commenced to grapple and endeavor to secure the white men, a party in the fort poured a full and heavy fire on them in the lump. Josiah Collins told Draper. Boone and the others said later that they saw at the instant the whole treaty proposal had been a ploy. But treachery took place, Nathan said, and a scuffle ensued. My father threw Blackfish flat on the ground. The plan seemed to be to grab the men from the fort and wrestle or drag them over to the nearby bank out of rifle range of the fort and hold them as hostages. When Blackfish in that manner gave the word go, they all started to drag his man behind the clay bank where they could murder them without any danger from the fort. With the leaders in custody under threat of torture and scalping and death by fire, the settlers would have to surrender the fort to the large Shawnee army. Boone had instructed his men in the fort to fire at the first sign of trouble, and they did. Blackfish had planted his marksmen nearby the night before, and as soon as the struggle began, the Indians commenced firing too. Some historians have suggested that Blackfish did not premeditate this attempt to take hostages, that he was negotiating the treaty and embracing the white leaders in good faith. The argument is that had he planned to attack, he could have attacked earlier. It is more likely that his patience had simply worn out. Before he had hoped Boone would surrender the fort without a fight, but by the 3rd day, he knew the settlers would not surrender and that hostage-taking was his only real chance for a forced surrender. He knew the odds were long against him taking the fort by siege without artillery, and he could not let his warriors return home empty-handed, nor tell the British at Detroit that he had simply failed. Taking Boone and the others hostage seemed the only way to fulfill his complex obligations.
Ugh.
Richard Calloway was the first to throw off the Indians and embracing him. As firing erupted from the fort and then from Indian rifles in the brush, the chief struggled with Boone and was thrown to the ground. A warrior nearby swung his pipe tomahawk and slashed Boone's back. All the Americans were powerful men, and in the rage of the moment they overcame the warriors. Even so, it seemed a miracle that they freed themselves, since the whites were outnumbered 2-1. John Mason Peck was as curious about the event as the historians following him would be.
Have you ever seen a pipe tomahawk before?
No.
It's literally I don't get why. It's a pipe. It's
What do you mean a pipe?
You smoke out of that. That's a bowl right there.
Oh.
So it's a peace pipe that's also a tomahawk, which is confusing to me.
So it's hollow handled,
Mm-hmm.
and you smoke out the back end of the axe.
Yeah,
basically.
so the axe basically has like a hammerhead on the back end that's hollow, and so it's
You can smoke it.
Yeah, smoking that
I
wampum.
would never have thought that it was a pipe. That it
When he
was
said pipe,
tomahawk.
that's what I thought, because I've seen them before. I had a high school teacher who had a collection of pipes.
So the whole event is peculiar, and other historians have been confused by this. It says, particular inquiries were made by the author of Stephen Hancock and Flanders Calloway how it was possible for 9 white men to overpower 18 Indians. The reply was that, expecting mischief, they were on the guard, and the Indians rarely possessed physical powers equal to white men. But each declared he never could recollect how the feat was achieved. They felt assurance of success. According to Kentucky folklore, one Indian warrior was the equal of 4 regular soldiers, and one Kentuckian a match for 2 Indians. The clash in front of Boonesborough was often cited as evidence of this claim.
It's called adrenaline.
What's funny, And who's more desperate? You know, how much heart was in this in the first place to wrestle him down? And then when the shots came from the fort and they were like, oh crap, we might get shot, you know, as they shot into the group, like, did they give up, you know? But this is funny. Would after hearing the boasting that people, prejudiced people, you know, say, you know, one Indian warrior was the equal of 4 regular soldiers. I don't think so, dude. You know, but I don't doubt that, you know, sometimes you'll see Native people that are a lot smaller than some of the Europeans that come across. That could be true. I mean, obviously Boone has repeatedly, you know, bulldozed. That's why they got the name Chautawi. Yeah. Because they seem to outsize a lot of the native people. And so, yeah, I mean, that's quite possible. But it says Boone later credited the sharpshooters from the fort for hitting enough Indians so he and his men were able to escape. I think that's more likely. More sense, yeah. They were grabbing on. They thought, we got this because there's too many of us to them, not expecting to be shot from the fort. And when those marksmen started shooting them, they gave up real quick, right?
Everyone in the fort was up there with a gun. It wasn't like 1 or 2. Everyone was there, bro.
So
that was a volley.
It says, as father used to say, it was this timely volley from the fort that saved the whites in the council. And it was his opinion that when he threw Blackfish down, the other Indians thought he had fallen from a shot from the fort. And this, father thought, probably added to their dismay and confusion. Squire Boone was hit by a rifle ball in the shoulder, but he was able to stagger back to the fort.
You know how loud it's going to be having like 40 guns go off all within seconds of each other?
That sucks to be shot in the shoulder by one of the shooters in the... These are not exactly accurate bullets.
Dude, I read an account during of someone getting hit with a musket ball.
Oh, dude.
And he talked about how, well, the musket ball melts partially as it's going through the air, and then it hits you, and it's actually like hot, molten lead.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember where it was. I want to say it was the Civil War or something like that, but an account of someone getting hit with a musket ball, because those like 50 caliber balls fly through the air. They're actually, they're like partially melted.
Yeah.
And they hit them, and so like, yeah, so it's like molten lead. It's like a thick piece. It's
lovely.
It's not solid, and you actually can go like look up online. I'll try to find one. They're gooey and splattery. Think if you had like a piece of metal that you dropped on the floor that was hot, the shape that it would be in. But instead, just imagine it thwacking against a person's chest.
Yeah, it's not good. So Squire Ball got hit by a rifle ball in the shoulder. So what's a rifle ball look like, Squire Boone's brother? So he got hit in the shoulder, not sure where in the shoulder. But he got hit in the shoulder, but he was able to stagger back to the fort. It says Boone had told the negotiators to leave their loaded...
It looks very similar to like the regular tip of a nose of a regular bullet, but it's got some grooves on it.
From that period? 1770?
Actually, no. That's... This is a mini ball. That wasn't invented until the 1800s.
Yeah, what's a rifle? A 1770 rifle ball, 1775... rifle ball. You know, they don't call it a bullet at this point. It says Boone had told the negotiators to leave their loaded rifles just inside the gate of the fort. As soon as they rushed inside, they grabbed their arms and made ready for battle. The siege they had dreaded and prepared for had begun. The gate of the fort was closed and bolted.
So this picture right here is interesting. So that, for those that, I'll throw it up. There's a quarter. There's a 30 caliber modern rifle. Then it's got muskets from 1795 going forward.
So where's before that? Just looks like a ball.
They pretty much looks like a ball. It wasn't until the 1800s that they started putting those spirals in.
Yeah, it's wild. So, that's your story of how the siege. I mean, what do you think about the Indians gathering around trying to wrestle them? I think I don't know what happened there because you don't really know. You don't have a definitive record.
Yeah.
You know, was he really trying to negotiate a peace? Was this all
It's one big
he had
charade.
like they all had planned contingencies. What's surprising though is as soon as it started to go south, or they felt like they were getting mugged, boom, they shot into the group and then ran off back to the fort. And the only person that got hit was Squire in the shoulder by one of his own. As far as they know, I mean, the Indians were also marksmen. He had stashed those in the trees. But anyway, they got back to the fort, and now I think it's funny how here's what I think. People who are trying to say that Blackfish wasn't setting a trap, I don't think that's accurate, because if he wasn't trying to set a trap, why did he try to put 3 Indians per person with
the tomahawk,
with a tomahawk behind? And why did he why was it all warriors instead of chiefs? And when he got called out, he's like, "Oh, okay, sorry," and he got rid of some of those warriors, and he still kept 2 Indians per white guy. You know what I mean? Like
their ceremonial peace pipe to his household will have to be double as a tomahawk,
right? Like you're sitting here and they're trying to hide it all, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that's all going down, and that just tells me that they were as dirty as Boone was with the people at the fort. And as soon as it looked like they were going to get snagged, like also you're supposed to shake hands, give out 2 hands at the same time to 2 different Indians. Like, dude, come on.
Yeah. It's not even a good lie. It's not even a good one. No. It's like, what's sad is that
Indian
they did
way
it,
of
though.
shaking hands.
Thanks, guys.
But they were trying, and it wasn't a bad plan, actually. But I think that what happened, honestly, was I don't doubt that the men at the fort were pretty stout fellas, but also their heart was in it more, and more to lose. And the people in the fort were shooting the hell out of them at 60 yards.
And the women can shoot, too. The women are just as good shooters as some of the men.
So anyway, they escaped to the fort. The next section gets wild and nutty. Okay,
this wasn't.
It gets wild, and there's things you're not gonna predict. And
so far, my predictions have been pretty crap. I haven't really predicted anything.
The next chapter is called "The Farthest Outpost of the Rebellion." This sounds like something from Star Wars. But that's how it goes down. We're going to get into that. Just a little prelude to the next chapter. It says, after Boone and the other negotiators escaped from the treaty site and reached safety inside the fort, the firing from the fort and from the Indians in the field began in earnest. Young Ambrose Coffey lay exposed on the southeast blockade, watching the events unfold. Suddenly, bullets began peppering around him, and when he dropped under cover and examined his clothes, he found many bullet holes, though his body was untouched. No less than 14 bullet holes were made in his clothes when he tumbled down into the bastion unhurt.
Okay, Neo. Sure. All right.
Hey. Hey, dude, there can be a little bit of...
Sure. 14? Maybe 2 or 3.
Maybe they were baggy clothes. He's a little kid. He's a small target. It says, suddenly the firing on both sides was deafening. The air filled with the stench of burned gunpowder. Children cried and women screamed, thinking the fort was about to be stormed. Dogs began howling in the compound, and cattle bawled, and horses ran to and fro, whinnying in terror. Cattle stampeded from one side of the enclosure to the other. Dun, dun, dun. So, anyway, we got to wrap up this episode. But, yeah, there you have it. We're one step closer to what happens next. These are crazy, wild times. This next chapter is pretty interesting. You know what's so crazy to me is this is like 100 years before Jeremiah Johnson, before Kit Carson. You know, it's like I've read a lot of that time period, and there's something cool that I find about this era, the Revolutionary War era, that's different than...
It's got a different feel from the West.
Oh, the West, when you have Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. And, you know, I guess it's more familiar to me.
It's more recent history.
Yeah. Less musket, more rifle. You know,
cannons. You got good stuff going on.
You know, I hate to use pop culture references as the source for so much of our way of thinking. But the truth is that really does help us paint a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think Last of the Mohicans is Daniel Boone in this moment in time, and when you think Dances with Wolves,
called it. I knew it.
you're thinking Jeremiah Johnson period of time. Completely different eras, but we tend to, in modern times, I think we tend to lump them all together 100%. Like Daniel Boone and Jeremiah Johnson. Like no, they're completely 100 years.
For me, it's the relationship with the Indians. It changes from when we move. As we move west, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse with them.
Well, I don't know.
I don't feel like there was the same amount of mingling of cultures.
True. By the time Americans had gained their independence and had started to build a nation and started to establish a foothold, they were here. And far more technologically advanced and unified under a central government in a way that the Indians never were. And so the technology gap between the new Americans in the nation and the natives was so wide. The Indians didn't have a chance. At the end of the day, they just didn't have a chance. They were too far behind in terms of technology. They couldn't do railroads. They didn't have manufacturing for rifles. They didn't have
revolvers. Yeah,
they just didn't have the tech to transport goods across the world with a railroad. And there was more of them, is thought, but they had a very difficult time coming together in a unified army because they weren't. They were an assortment of tribes, and allegiances very different, and goals and values. And I don't think they predicted or understood. There's a few stories, with like Red Cloud, who is a Lakota warrior chief. He is. He goes, I think he's imprisoned, or Yellowtail, or anyway, there's a few of these Lakota chief or warriors who are put in prison in the East. They learn English while they're there. They're in prison 3 or 4 years or something like that. Maybe it's longer. And then they're released and they're allowed to go. They go back to where they came from. They had a totally different idea. They understood now what they were up against in a way that the people who were living out on the edges of the frontier, the native people, didn't know. And you could hear it in some of their discussions, like it is futile to try to fight them. Like they're a rolling tide of locusts coming across the land, and they'll forever change it. You don't understand like where we're too far behind in this game. And unfortunately, I believe it was unreconcilable. There's no way you could have changed the outcome of what happened. Because like it said in our earlier discussion of this book, Native people and Europeans had a completely different mindset of how, totally different worldview. They didn't understand. They thought the Indians were lazy. And didn't want to work. And the Indians looked at them and said, "Why do you work so hard day in and day out to plant crops and to have houses and horses and all this stuff when you can just nature just provides? Just chill a little bit, have some adventure, be a warrior." A more primitive lifestyle that they valued. They weren't lazy. They didn't value the same things. And Europeans mistook the native people's values for laziness and things like that, and then I think the Indians didn't understand where the Europeans were coming from and why they valued property ownership and peace. Like, one thing that the native cultures didn't have was peace. They warred all the time. You never knew when you might get killed by another warring tribe. That kept you alert, kept you alive, you never knew what tomorrow might bring. You much more wild existence. Remember Jeremiah Johnson in Crow Killer, he says, it says that, if the Indians are gone, I don't want to be here anymore, because how boring it would be to just go trap and hunt without the danger of getting stabbed in the back by an Indian, like that made life exciting. And I think that was kind of the warrior culture among Indians is something that they didn't want to erase. They didn't really want it to go away. They actually, you proved you were a man by getting into some battles and some scrapes and stealing some horses and so on. Like they had an honor code in battle, so to speak. Like they wanted, but still, it's like when the Crow, the legend is that they send 20 warriors to kill Jeremiah Johnson. They do it one man at a time, one-on-one, face-to-face or whatnot. They didn't send 20 men at once to ambush him. They didn't send the whole tribe. Like, there was a warrior culture that was valued, and that was valued across all the native people, generally speaking. And so you ended up with Europeans, there was an idea like, we should never be killing each other. That's nonsense. We should be at peace, and we should coexist, and there should be safety, and there should be police stations, and there should be the sheriffs, and you should have Wyatt Earp, and people shouldn't
tea time at noon
and all this kind of stuff. And they brought civilization and peace and safety, and they brought comforts and higher education in many ways, and rational thought that was beyond like religious thought. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, I find myself asking myself, is, which way of living is better? Like, I love, Stephen Ranella wrote this chapter in Meat Eater. We should read that book on this show sometime down the road. I read it years ago when I was on a trip in Prince of Wales Island in Alaska. I was in Southeast Alaska, and I was there for 2 weeks. I drove my truck there, drove it, parked it on a ferry, floated it there, got to the island. I was, and I read the book, and I read it multiple times. And he has a chapter in there that talks about this dichotomy between civilization and all its benefits and wonders and the specialness of what it brings to the table. The books by classical art, Greek mythology, and just the writings in the Bible and the Stoics, and there's so many wonderful things that civilization brought to humanity. And then there's so much that civilization is against in terms of nature and understanding our more primitive way of living, and our appreciation for wild animals and wild places, and the stillness that nature brought to us, and all the things that are sort of that modern civilization is antithetical to, that we kind of lose in ourselves. Just the struggle to live every day, being cold, having to start a fire, get wood, like all these things that civilization makes it so we never have to deal with again. That you have these two worlds that go against each other, and human beings are sort of stuck in both. And he has a brilliant chapter where he sort of juxtaposes the two things, civilization and a more primitive lifestyle, and it's really cool what he says.
What did Luther Standing Bear say? Man's heart from nature
Man's heart away from nature turns hard, becomes hard. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth there as well. Think about it. I mean, when you grow up in the dirt outside in a teepee and you just smell the air, you deal with the changing seasons, the hot and the cold. You have pristine rivers, animals, fish, birds, nature. You live close to nature. And the body and humanity is super adapted to it in reality. Instead of trying to tame it and control it, the Indians flowed with it and rolled with it. And that's something that people lose the ability to do as they become more and more civilized. They adopt more and more of what civilization has to offer. And I don't know. It's something to think about. Part of the chapter, if I recall it correctly, was that I liked about it was Ranella was saying, in a sense, that by being a hunter and going outside and doing what we do, we reclaim a little bit of we sort of reclaim a little bit of our past and what we're really meant to experience as human beings, as in a more, you get to put yourself in those primitive situations where you're hungry, you're cold, you're wet, you're in nature, you're feeling her elements. When a storm hits you and a tsunami is coming to Kodiak Island and you're running to high ground and you're getting rained on and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or it's a cold, negative 10 degrees and you're trying to get a fire burning at the top of a mountain in some rugged wilderness, and you are 20 miles from anywhere. The snow is coming down and you're in a storm and you just shot a giant muley buck. Like those are, and I mean, I don't know. There's just, you have no connection to email, no connection to the outside world. You have no idea what's happening. Each day is immersed in a goal to find an animal that's difficult to find, hike to it, search for it, glass for it. In the meantime, try to stay warm, get yourself fed, make sure you have water, make sure you don't get lost, make sure that you have the physical stamina. You're budgeting the oppressive weather, the danger of it, against the goal to try to find that thing in those elements and get that buck and then come back. And you're employing all your technological gizmos that you bring with you from your backpack and your stove and all of that, but you're blending that with a toughness to stay outside despite those conditions and not leave, not get lonely, not to stay in the moment, to make that dash and to the top of a mountain to get to a buck that you would never climb in that snow and that blizzard to get to that spot and try to do it before dark. And it just is, it's not rational for modern civilization to do that. And yet we do it to see if we can do it. And then we employ all our skills as woodsmen to make sure that we navigate our way back. And look, it's not the same. I'm not Daniel Boone with a broken rifle and no stock for it. And I'm not fashion, I'm out there with my iPhone that has map systems on it and a satellite, and I'm in the dark and I got a nice headlamp that gives me a nice light that's super bright. I'm watching for grizzlies with a bright light and I'm following my GPS tracks, and it's not the same. I'd like to think that I have the ability without those things to survive, which I believe, yeah, I do. But it sure is nice to have those modern tools. It doesn't take away, by the way, from the coldness and the suffering. The clothing and the gear does for sure. But anyway, that's just something to consider when you think about these people in the past and what it was like, that in some ways we greatly benefit from what civilization brings to the table, and we greatly lose because of it as well. That there's two worlds colliding, and if you can find a way to balance the two, I think you're doing it right. You're the closest you can get to, living a good life. I heard Joe Rogan not too long ago talk about a hunt and going on it, and he was describing when he came home and he sat down. He's like, I'm in a temperature controlled room after he was freezing to death for days, fingers ice cold. I have hot water coming out of a bath. I'm eating a burger and fries, and I'm having a milkshake, and like these little things. He's only been out for like a week, yet you come back from some of these things and you're just like, wow, you are so grateful for the little things, for the tiny things. So grateful that you just have hot water. Just so grateful that you can click on a stove and cook an egg, instead of having, some kind of energy bar or whatever. So I think that depriving oneself of comfort is essential to being grateful for what civilization brings to the table, and for recognizing when civilization is robbing you of those discomforts that actually in the end bring you more joy than misery. Like, we're meant to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
We are. We're meant to struggle physically. We're meant to be cold and fight through it.
We're adapted for physical problems, not these mental issues society throws at us.
Both. I mean, there's a lot of stress I think Boone is under in these circumstances, but talk about a different time frame though, right? Like what he's dealing with, not really our issues, today.
No, not so much. No.
Anyway, it's been a great book so far. I hope everybody is enjoying the series. Kind of went off there for a little bit, but yeah, we're going to jump back into this on the next episode. We'll dive right into, you don't want to miss it. It's really cool. The next parts of this story really are they're just the coolest, man. So later on, when we get through this period, and Boone beats the odds over and over. He dies at 86 or something.
Mm-hmm.
In long time after this. So he there's a lot to Boone's life after this period, but we're still in that crazy Boone period where you're like, no way this is real. And it is. It happened. So tune into the next one. We thank you for tuning in. Make sure that if you can, support the author, Robert Morgan. The book is called Boone, a Biography. Get it on Audible, download it, get the audio version if you don't want to buy the paperback. But I love having both. I listen to books and I'll go through and I'll mark up books. And
if I have a paperback book, man,
I do like to have both actually. But yeah, we couldn't bring you this podcast if we didn't have the brilliant work of Robert Morgan here, putting it all together. So we are getting there. We're getting there, Brent. We're getting there. We're getting through this story. So thanks for tuning in, folks, and we'll catch you on the next one. All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your grandpa.
Hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.